You're listening to the Reanimated Writers Podcast, where we talk to authors who write about zombies. Each episode will feature an author in the genre, and we'll talk about their path to writing about the undead, plus their author journey. This is episode number 3, and I'm your host, RJ Spears. Before we get too far along, I want to make sure you know about the Reanimated Writers Fiction Fan Group on Facebook, along with the companion website, reanimatedwriters.com. If you're a fan of zombie fiction, then I encourage you to check both those out. Today we're talking to Kevin Penelrick, who writes under the name Grivante. He's a writer of zombie fiction, but also runs a small press for fiction, along with so many other ventures that we'll just have to wait to get into them in the interview. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Randy. I'm glad to be a part of the show today.
All right, the first thing I want to get into, I want you to tell us about your path to writing. Have you always wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when I was a young kid, first and second grade, and they were teaching us how to read, I loved reading. I loved reading the different stories and had a real strong passion for reading. And then shortly thereafter, I think it was in the third grade, we had a school project where we had to write a story, and it was an Easter story, and we also illustrated it. And then we had to go down to the kindergarten class and read it to those children. And it was such a great experience seeing these young kids just get themselves enmeshed in the story, following along, laughing, and enjoying the story that I wrote, that I was instantly hooked on being able to tell a story and interact with others in that way. And then shortly thereafter, I started writing fan fiction of things like Friday the 13th, and my favorite TV show at the time, which was called V, an alien invasion show. And it was a blast to be able to write and create and see people react to the weird, crazy stories I was telling.
That's always, I remember, I did not write as young as you did, but I wrote in high school, and I got a lot of really good feedback from my English teacher. And, well, it took me a lot longer to get to what I really wanted to do. So what attracted you to writing about the undead?
You know, it's funny. I've always loved zombies. Like many, I was a huge fan of the Romero movies, introduced to them at a very early age. And so I've always loved them, and I also always loved zombie comics, but I never necessarily intended to write about them. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I just sat down with a blank sheet of paper, wanted to write something, and started writing, and before I knew it, zombies were popping into the story, and the Z Brothers were born.
Well, tell us about the Z Brothers and your zombie exterminators. Tell us about your series.
Okay. So the Z Brothers it's Jonah and Judas, and they are 2 brothers who have the unusual occupation of being zombie exterminators. And in my universe, zombies are less of an apocalypse level event and more of a nuisance, because I kind of believe that unless they were to be in very large numbers very quickly, and or there was some sort of pandemic that happened that caused large numbers, they would be pretty manageable. And so in my world, they get phone calls from time to time when somebody discovers a zombie or there's some sort of outbreak, and then they go and deal with that. And when they do, it usually involves a fair amount of chaos, hilarity, and crazy over-the-top action. They're a lot of fun to write because you never know what's going to happen next. My stories they're not set in the real world per se. There's magic, there's some science fiction, there's all sorts of crazy things that can happen that you won't find in your typical Zombie book.
So tell me about the main characters in that book, and were they based on anyone in your life, or were they just whole creations out of your mind?
You know, so pretty much every character I write has bits and pieces of myself, of people that I know, of people that I've encountered. Jonah is the kind of charismatic leader of the duo. He's gruff, he's dominant, he gets things done, he's the one who makes plans. And then there's his little brother Jonah, who is a little bit of a goofball, a lot more silly and redneck and testosterone filled than his older brother. And those are both aspects of myself who I've been at different parts of my life, as well as good friends of mine. So, I think all writers, we draw from what we know, and bits and pieces of those become our characters.
That's fantastic to hear about. So, where's the setting for your books? What part of the country?
So they take place in Arizona. They're in and around Tucson and Phoenix, even all the way up to Flagstaff. And predominantly that's where they're going to stay, is in that area.
Oh, great. Fantastic. So you're not only a writer, but you also run a publishing outlet called Grivante Press. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So when I was getting started in the indie publishing world, I knew that I was going to do more than just one thing. And I have a passion for working with other creative people, and I wanted to be able to have an umbrella under which to do that. So I formed the publishing company, and I published one anthology, which is called Mashed. It's a erotic horror anthology, and we have plans to do some others down the road. Right now there's a lot of other projects on the front plate, so I'm not sure how soon we're going to get to those, but it gives me an opportunity to have a place to put all of these different publishing ideas to work.
So, and through there, you also offer, some author services, and I noticed you have a narrator on board. So are you producing audiobooks?
So I don't produce audiobooks, but what I do is people that I work with, I take the time to give them publicity. So the narrators that you'll see on our website, Ian McEwen, he is the narrator who has done the Z Brothers books so far. And then you'll also see Missy Cambridge. She's the narrator who did Mashed. And it's just a way of saying thank you. They get paid, but I also want the world to know that, hey, these people have done work with me. They're good people. Here's where to find more about them. It's just a way of giving back to other creatives that I work with.
Okay. So you recently organized, I think this was in February, a free book event for zombie readers and authors to allow them to get access to like 14 different authors, and for the authors to get exposure to new readers. Can you tell us about that? And do you have anything wild like that planned in the future?
Oh, we've got lots planned. So yeah, it was actually April. It was Friday the 13th freebies. And so for anybody who doesn't know, we have the Reanimated Writers Fiction Fan Group, which is the public version where we interact with the fans. There's also a behind-the-scenes author-only group where all of us authors work together, network, discuss ideas, and come up with promos. And that's where the genesis for the Friday the 13th freebies promo came from. And we are planning another one for the week of the 4th of July called 4th of July Freebies. And I think right now we've got about 10 authors already signed up for that one. And there'll be different authors than were in the last one. So readers will get access to brand new books in that promo. We're also working on Undead Worlds 2, which I believe you were in the first one, correct?
No, I was not. I joined the group after that and got into production. I feel like I really missed out, and I need to get off my lazy butt and submit for Undead Worlds too. So,
yeah, get busy. The deadline's going to come fast.
So tell us about Undead Worlds and what it was all about.
So Undead Worlds was an idea put forth, and I'll step back for a second. So one of the things that's great about our group is that it's really a collective. Anybody can bring an idea forth, and if there's enough people that want to support it, it'll happen. It's all about people working together to make something happen. And Undead Worlds was exactly that. Valerie Ludis brought forth the idea of, hey, we should do an anthology. Everybody was like, heck yes, let's make that happen. And so 22 of us got together, started brainstorming ideas. What do we want it to look like? What do we want it to be? And it just, over the course of a few months, took shape and became this awesome book that they're brand new stories from each author's undead world that kind of gives us an introduction to them. So as a reader, you can pick up the book, read the stories. They're all fairly short, from 1,000 words up to about 10,000 words. And you get a taste for not only that author's world, but their writing style. And you can determine, do you want to go on and read more of their books? So it's been a great success. We've had, I don't even know how many, it's somewhere close to 20,000 copies downloaded, and it's introduced many readers to the authors that were in the book that they weren't familiar with, and so it's been great.
So tell us about the follow-up, Undead Worlds 2. What's is it going to be similar, different?
Yeah, so Undead Worlds 2 is going to be pretty much the same concept. Authors are submitting their stories now. So the first one was kind of an open, anybody who wanted in was in, and we made it happen. And we learned a lot during the first book, both from the marketing aspects and the producing aspects of what it took to put that together. So we made some changes. We standardized some things. We've got a submission process this time to kind of help us with quality control and making sure we're getting the best stories that we can. We have put a cap on it of 21 authors, both because of Amazon's rules around how many authors they can list, as well as just to keep the book a manageable size. First book was pretty massive at almost 500 pages, so we're trying to keep it in that same ballpark. But other than that, the basic concept is the same. Authors write a story that's brand new, that introduces us to some aspect of their world. It can be a side character, it can be backstory, it can be the origin of a character or the initial outbreak, pretty much anything.
Okay. So I look at all these things, you've got Grivante Press, you're a primary instigator, manager, organizer, and, head chef of Reanimated Authors, you're writing. So how do you juggle all these things we've talked about so far?
It's complicated. It really is. Luckily I've been very lucky in the last year to kind of have a team form around me, specifically with the Reanimated Writers. So a lot of the things that I am seen as doing are only because of the people that are helping me do that. And that's the team of admins such as yourself that is bringing this podcast to life. Valerie, who has so many wonderful ideas that sometimes we can't do them all, but she's always bringing something cool and exciting to us to put together. To Shelley Blaylock, that is kind of I don't know, she's my sounding board. She keeps us in reality a lot of the times, because Valerie and I come up with these crazy ideas, and she'll give us the reasons why we might want to rethink that. To Pam Troop Jones, who's one of the fans, who's also an admin. She's like our biggest cheerleader, keeps us going. So there's a lot of people that help me. But aside from that, I'm just really focused at this point in my life in creating and recognizing that that's what I'm passionate about, and that I love creating with others. I love making things happen, and I love seeing these big projects like Undead Worlds come to fruition and see what we can make of them. It drives me.
So backing up just a little bit, what is the scope and the size of the Reanimated Writers fan fiction group right now? I mean, I know it started small and it has really exploded. So how many people are in that group?
I think today we broke 1,200, and it grows. We get 1 or 2 new requests per day, sometimes 5 or 10. When a new author joins, and a lot of their fans will come, we can get even more. So it's slow and steady, which is nice. And the fans that are in the group are so awesome. They are happy and excited when the authors share content or interact with them. And they're just such great people. I've really loved getting to know them.
So what are some of the daily things that go on in that group that if someone had found this podcast but weren't in the group, that would entice them to become a member?
Gotcha. So there is so much going on in there, and this is, again, the whole team aspect. So pretty much each day of the week, a different admin is in charge of something that's happening. We've got Pam on Mondays posts cute and funny zombie-related memes, and I don't really remember the rest of the schedule after that, but Ryan does a choose-your-own-adventure poll, which is kind of fun. So he posts some different options, and people choose, if this is happening during the apocalypse, what might you do? And then he crafts the next one based on the most popular response from the following week. Joshua Guest does a Caption This contest, which is always fun, where we put up different pictures and everybody kind of makes fun and has fun with whatever the picture is and what it might be leading to. Shelley runs a couple of contests. Valerie runs a book bomb review club, as well as other postings. We've got a free book thread, as well as new releases. I don't know, there's so much content that comes in there. We have author takeovers, where once a week an author comes in, runs contests, games, giveaways. We just recently did with Jessica Gomez the live write event, which was a lot of fun, where two authors are shown a picture and then they write back and forth over the course of an hour and create a completely random story. And so there's a lot going on in that group.
There is. I mean, it's amazing the amount of content gets generated in a week. And, I'm a part of so many groups, but none are as active as this one. I can tell you that. So I want to go back and talk about writing just a little bit and ask you, what writers have inspired you over the years?
So the obvious one, I think every author that you have on here will probably say it, Stephen King. Huge fan of his work, the Dark Tower series, and the way that he melds everything together, all of his work, how it's interconnected. I love that. There are pieces of everything. Every one of my different stories are kind of intermingled in similar ways. There's just little tidbits here and there. Huge fan of Terry Pratchett. I love his comedic style, the way his words flow. Also a huge fan of L. Ron Hubbard's Mission Earth series. And when I was growing up, I read a lot of comic books, so I didn't necessarily know the writers' names, but I loved things like Spider-Man and Moon Knight. My favorite zombie comic as a kid was called Dead World, and I read a ton, so I was influenced by so many different writers, and I could never name them all, but those are a few of the top three.
So what about, I have a list of questions, and I'm just going to throw this one in earlier. What is your favorite zombie movie?
My favorite zombie movie, this will be a two-part answer. So the first one I ever saw was Dawn of the Dead, the original, and I loved it, and that imprinted on me, and I will always, always, always love it. And then for more modern zombie movies, it's a real tight race between Shaun of the Dead and Zombieland. For anybody who reads my series, it's very comedic horror. I love the punniness of that kind of work, and so those types of zombie movies really appeal to me, because it takes a lot to take that horror element and yet make people laugh. And so when a movie can pull that off, keeping you scared and laughing at the same time, it's a beautiful thing.
Oh, no, Shaun of the Dead. Like you, Dawn of the Dead was my first zombie movie, and it is still my favorite by far. But I love Shaun of the Dead and 28 Days Later. But Zombieland, that's a biannual movie that shows in our house. So we sit down and get to see Bill Murray pop out of nowhere, and that was such a surprise cameo. So where do you see the genre going? And let's stick to fiction right now. A lot of people say, "Oh, zombies are dead." Well, they are dead, but the books are dead. But I still see it being, I wouldn't call it, completely vibrant, but there are dedicated readers out there. So where do you see the genre going?
So I agree. I hear that a lot as well, and you hear that about any genre that gets popular. Vampires, they peak every 5 to 10 years. There's a new envisioning of it, and they get popular, and then they fade away again. And I feel it's the same with zombies. I mean, the last decade has really been the zombie decade. They've had their time in the limelight, and I do think that's fading a bit. But what I'm seeing personally, because we're so close to the pulse of all these new authors that are coming into it, is new ideas, new envisionings of how the genre can be, and new twists. And I see that, there is a core group of fans that are going to read it, and they're going to read it all, and they're going to love it. But I think that the types of stories and the way that people are using zombies in their stories is going to appeal to a wider and continuing to grow audience. I recently listened to a book called Speak Easy Dead by Vicki Lobel, and it had zombies in it, but it wasn't a Zombpoc book, and it was really enjoyable. It reminded me a lot of like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was based in the 1920s and dealt with magic and zombies, and it was just really fun. And it's stuff like that that I think keeps the zombie genre fresh.
And I do think it needs that around the edges. I know people come in for the tropes, and there's still a lot of people dedicated to that. But I mean, it definitely sounds like Z Brothers is right in that sweet zone of being original and fun. So keep going with that. So I want to ask you a question, because you were talking about some of your inspirations. And so if you had to write or wanted or write a book outside the genre, what would it be? Just curious.
So it would be young adult fantasy, and that was one author that I didn't mention earlier, who was Terry Brooks, the author of the Shannara series. That was another one that really impacted me as a young reader. And I actually have a young adult fantasy novel completed. It was the second book that I actually completed, the second novel, and it needs some work, and I do hope to get back to it once I complete the Z Brothers series, because the Z Brothers does have a very definite ending. My plan is to go back to working on that, and then I also have kind of a post-apocalyptic, futuristic adventure series that I might dive into. There's a lot of ideas. I'm not sure which one will win out in the end.
Yeah, that's really hard for people that are creative. Is you probably have a treasure trove of ideas. It's just which one to pull out of the hat.
Yes.
So what are you working on right now? What's next?
So right now I am so I write longhand first. So I scribble in notebooks, and I completed the rough draft of the third book in the series called Halloween Holocaust a couple of months ago, and now I've been spending most mornings typing it into Scrivener, which is what I use to write in. And because of all the things I have going on, it's a pretty tedious, slow process, unfortunately. And that's probably the biggest downside about me as a writer, is that I write slow. And I have so many things going on that it's sometimes hard for me to get projects done in a timely manner. But I am a little over halfway in the initial edit. So I write longhand, and then as I type it, I do my first round of edits. And I hope to have everything typed in by the end of May, do a second round of edits, get it off to the editor, and have it out sometime this summer.
Is the longhand choice, is that a choice, or you're just stuck with it because you're on the move, you're doing so many things that you got your tablet over here and you're writing down, or are you just forced into it?
It's just something that I've chosen, and I've often thought about maybe I should change it because it's just not that productive overall. But when I sit down in front of the computer, as I think for all of us these days, there are so many distractions that I think I fear getting lost. So I like to completely disconnect, take my little spiral notebook and go sit in a park or sit at the coffee table with no electronics around me and just write without distractions.
So, and delving into that, is what is your writing day like? Do you have a dedicated time? You're up at 6:30 in the morning, or you do it at night before you go to bed, or are you just fitting it in where you can?
Generally speaking, I try to do it first thing in the morning. I get up, I get a little bit of exercise to get the blood pumping, and then I sit down at the table and try and write for at least a half an hour to an hour. Some days I have to hold off and I do it during my lunch break. But I try to get it done first thing in the morning, because it's one of those things as a writer that if I don't write for a few days, I start to get grumpy. And my wife will notice that, and she'll be like, honey, you need to write tomorrow. And so it's important enough that I try and make it a part of each morning, even if it's just one page.
I'm the same way. If I don't write, I get really grouchy. My wife hasn't recognized that yet. I'm just a grouch. So where can people find out more about you and your work, whether it's Grivante Press or whether it's your fiction?
So pretty easy to find. First, you can find us on our website, which is grivantepress.com, Gravante. And I'm on social media under Grivante, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, probably some other sites that I've forgotten about. So just type in Grivante on Google and you're sure to find me somewhere. I'm on Goodreads and BookBub as well. So that's the easy way to do it. And of course, in the Reanimated Writers Fiction fan group.
Okay, I've got a wild card to throw at you. It's a question I think I'm going to start including in all the interviews. And this was out of nowhere. So if some powerful entity came to you right now and said, I can grant you one of two powers. The power of flight, you can fly 500 miles per hour, your clothes stay on, you don't burn up with friction or something like that. Or the power of invisibility. Only you and your clothes are invisible. Which would you choose? Why? And what would you do with it?
Well, I love the thought of being able to be invisible, but the more practical one for me would be able to fly at 500 miles an hour, because I live in the woods and it's a good hour to get anywhere from where we live for the most part. So to be able to travel fast would allow me to get things done and go and do more things. I would love to do more conventions, to be able to travel, go to the Caribbean, and so flight would definitely be it, and I'd use it for everything.
And that's the same way for me. I'd want to advance that to teleportation, but I'm only given two choices. Anyway, I'm on the outside looking in at your career and your life. Is there anything you want to add that we haven't touched on yet?
Nothing that comes to mind, no. Right now I'm pretty much focused on the Z Brothers. We do have some other projects that aren't zombie related that are coming to fruition right now. We've got a kids book club and some other stuff that we're going to be doing soon, but my primary focus as it relates to zombies today is the Z Brothers, and then we're going to also be doing a box set, which may be live by the time this airs. From the Reanimated Writers, we're going to have, it's called First in Series, Apocalyptic Beginnings. So we've got a bunch of authors that are going to give us their first book. We're going to put it in this box set, and we're going to be releasing it at a bargain price so people can get a lot of full novels to check out these authors and their series, all for a great price.
Fantastic. So anyway, I want to thank everybody that listened to the podcast today, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a review on whatever source you heard it from, whether it be iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever. And also, again, please check out the Reanimated Writers website at reanimatedwriters.com. Kevin, thanks so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you, Randy. It's been a pleasure.
All right, we'll tune in next time. We'll have another fantastic guest for you.